Howdy Exiles, welcome to this video about the cast on crit assassin in 3.18 Sentinel League. Now, I'm going to have a lot of opinions on this build, the character, the league, and the meta in general, and you can trust all of them being true because I look like I share the sleeping schedule of a vampire. I have a crippling vitamin D deficiency, and I barely look like I'm of legal age to drink. Now, getting into things, the cast on crit assassin archetype. Now, this is a build archetype specifically designed for clearing maps. Okay, if you walk into Uber Cyrus, for example, with this build, you're going to get your shit creamed. Yeah, it's gonna suck. So, with that in mind, we're gonna hop into some things here. I'm gonna go over the build for you. How I've been enjoying it, what little things I do to make it feel good, and hopefully you can use it for yourself. Now, I will say, before you hop into things, there are some timestamps, and if you have been playing Cast on Crit, there's not a lot of you. If you have been playing Cast on Crit this league, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll go ahead and read those. I'm really interested in what you think of my take on the archetype because it is quite a bit different than others. All right, let's hop into it. So let's get into some gameplay just to show you what's what on this build. So a few things. I have made some edits, of course, since this video was taken a couple days ago, but this will give you a general idea of what this build's good for, why we're using it, and why I think it is the most powerful mapping build in 3.18, no holds barred. There is some discussion, RF, it's pretty fast, pretty good, good quality of life. There is the, ward loop shenanigans still happening. Don't know when that'll be nerfed, but this build, I think, passes both of them. And why do I say that? Okay, first of all, Cyclone. So a lot of the Arch&M mods don't interact well with other builds. We have the Echoist mod for a lot of builds. That is actually a pretty large DPS decrease. For something like Cyclone, just fine. When you steal that modifier off a rare, you're still chilling, you're still zooming, you're still spinning. On top of that, the Arch&M rares that throw down little ice walls. I'm not sure if you knew, Cyclone actually just makes you go right through Frost Wall. On top of that, shrines on the Atlas tree and in the map device. So Cyclone scales amazingly well with basically every single shrine. The AoE that you can get from Cast on Crit, of course, we're Cast on Critting Frostbolt and Freezing Pulse. So the projectiles, X projectiles you're going to be getting are amazing. Force acceleration is just feels incredible on a Cyclone build, as you can see here in this Legion. We're just zooming around everywhere. And of course, all the defensive options from Shrines and from Arch Nemesis mods right now. So the best thing about Arch Nemesis mods, there's a silver lining, is the defensive value that they add. So when we throw on an Inspired Learning, getting a ton of survivability in a Cast on Crit build, which is something that it normally struggles a lot with. In T16 maps right now, it's kind of hard for me to be even losing my energy shield. You'll kind of see just because of how much scaling we're getting from all these different sources. Okay. So you're kind of seeing what the build is about. It's the zoom, go fast, bang, bang, CoC build, right? So how do we get you into a map doing that? There's a lot going on. Okay, if you haven't played Cast on Crit before, there is a lot of mechanics we need to go over for you. So a lot of this tree is set up simply for speed. You're going to notice we're going to have all the power charges. We're going to go ahead and pick up an Inspired Learning slot with all these nodes here. Most of our notables on our jewels are just going to be Area of Effect, which is a great multiplier for our Herald of Ice, which we'll get into later. We're going to pick up some LE Res, just kind of fill out the gaps in the build, and of course life and resistance, but pretty simple tree. That's about it. There's not a lot of damage going on here. We're mostly just filling out, little things, preservation efficiency, and additional curse, and that AoE. Other than that, we're also going to be wearing a lot of items to go fast, okay? So this build right now is using a goal. This is the strongest helmet for mapping in the game, in my opinion. It's basically a headhunter. Okay, if you like old headhunter, buy a gull. It's the exact same feel. You saw it in the gameplay video there. Um, this mask feels amazing to use. On top of that, getting one with a power charge, I think I bought this for like 60 chaos in the first week. Super, super cheap, super easy to get. It does have a crazy enchant on it. I don't play Blade Vortex, but if anyone wants to buy that for me, just let me know. Okay, now the other things we're using to go fast: action speed and movement speed and onslaught and our flow untethered. Okay, let's get into it. So I do use a flow untethered belt, not even for the cooldown recovery. I literally just use it for the action speed. I'm not getting tailwind in this setup, mostly because the implicits on boots are super crazy. We'll get into that later, but flow untethered is going to be giving us that 10% action speed. Sure, it covers my cooldown recovery rate slot that you're going to need for cast on crit. If you haven't played cast on crit, I'll get into what that means in a second. And on top of that, elusive. Okay, elusive is insane for mapping speed. If you don't have elusive, you can't keep up. So our badge of the Brotherhood is giving us 80% increased effect of elusive. We're getting another about 60% from our ascendancy and other various means. So we're basically getting about 60 to 70% movement speed from elusive in this build, which is insane on a Cyclone build, especially that has a less movement speed multiplier being applied to all that. As you can see, if I take off elusive, it's almost 70% of our movement speed right now. So extremely strong. Okay, that covers the movement speed. Let's cover how we're getting giant screen clearing. As you can see, I do not wear a Carcass Jack. It's super popular in most CoC builds that are focused on clear to wear a Carcass Jack. From what I've kind of noticed in maps, there is no difference between wearing a Carcass Jack and not wearing a Carcass Jack. I'll go ahead and kind of pull up an example of that right now. So, in this map, I've actually taken off. I was using a Carcass Jack. I thought it was good. I thought it was great. I decided to do a test. I took it off and went ahead and put on a Tabula just to kind of see how it would work, and noticed there's basically no difference. The Carcass Jack is kind of it's kind of not having any effect at all, as far as I could tell. I'll go ahead and leave this on in the background, but instead of that, we can get a lot of power and defenses from our chest. Carcass Jack just doesn't offer, Eater of Worlds, Searing Exarch implicits that are so strong on the chest right now. I find it hard to play a build without a rare chest. You can get the aura effect on the chest. You can get max res. So many crazy things you can get right now on chest implicits. Not to mention recombinator crafting those rares. Chest pieces can give you some insane modifiers in quality of life. There you go. Look, screen is exploding. Don't even need the Carcass Jack. So where is all that clear coming from? Right? Obviously, you can see the Herald of the Ice explosions, but the key thing for you to notice here is that projectiles that are shooting out from my character, okay, that are perpetuating Herald of Ice. So let's get into how we scale projectiles on a CoC build. So, number one, you're gonna want a Dying Sun. This is gonna feel amazing with cast on crit. It might sound counterintuitive. Dying Sun is a Deadeye or a Ranger item, right? Or, a bow item. Not necessarily. The two additional projectiles actually scale really well with Frostbolt, with Freezing Pulse, because both of them pierce all targets. So these two additional projectiles are going to go all over the screen, hitting enemies, freezing enemies, and most importantly, proccing your Herald of Ice, causing giant chains of explosions. So, that brings us to our links. Where do we have Freezing Pulse? What are we linking to it? Where do we have Frostbolt? Where are we linking to it? So, in my setup right now, I do get exposure from Frostbomb, so I need that in one of my setups, but all I have on Freezing Pulse is Bone Chill, and this skill will still hit super hard. Hard enough to kill every white monster in your map. About 100,000 hit on a freezing pulse, and that triggers a few times a second. So white mobs, even in T16, they're pretty much going to get one shot by a freezing pulse. You don't need to worry too much about scaling this up with support gems or anything like that. I do link it to Bone Chill to go ahead and proc extra damage from Bone Chill. But yeah, super simple for freezing pulse. Frost bolts. These are going to be hitting a little bit harder than your freezing pulses. They're also going to be generating some frenzy charges. We'll get into why we want those in a second, but they're also going to be linked to lesser multiple projectiles just to extend those clears as far as possible. That is actually where your clear comes from. Most of your clear doesn't come from area of effect. Most of your clear comes from Frostbolt and Herald of Ice. So while we do pick up a lot of area in the tree, it is not worth investing area of effect anywhere else. Just pick it up in your notables. You're going to be fine. Okay. Let's talk about Cast on Crit. So, for people who've played Cast on Crit before, this next section you might want to skip through. But for people who haven't played, it's super important. And I know the past couple leagues, most people, Cast on Crit hasn't been popular, so most people won't know it, how it works, how to set it up yet. So, how to set up your character. There are four things you need to worry about on a Cast on Crit character, okay? First of all is going to be attack speed. Why do we care about attack speed? So Cyclone is going to be our triggering skill. When we hit an enemy with Cyclone, if it crits, the server will check to see if it can cast a socketed spell that is connected to a Cyclone or a spell that is in your Cosprey's Malice Sword. If we're attacking too slow, we actually won't reach a rate where we're proccing it as much as is available to us. So, attack speed, number one. Also, if we're attacking too fast, we'll actually overload, or we'll actually have too many attacks going through. So, with too many attacks going through, the server will check too often, and in the intervals between the server checks, we'll have a spell become available. Sounds a little complicated. I'll get into that in a second. Make it real simple for you at the end. Now, on top of attack speed, we're also worried about hit chance. Okay, if you need to hit an enemy to proc a spell, you need to make sure you're always hitting. So how do we cover that? We get one item with a good accuracy mod. Okay, 400 plus is going to be plenty. You're going to want a precision. I socketed mine in a slot that gives +1. Actually, I didn't anymore. I used to do that. I went ahead and corrupted my precision for level 21. Okay, so I went for a 21 precision. You can do it on a 20. You could also just put it in an item slot that has +1 to gems, such as the glove slot. You can go ahead and craft +1 AoE gems on your gloves, and you can get 21 that way. You don't really need it, but it is nice quality of life. It'll help you out a little bit, give you some more crit strike. Okay. Only other thing you're going to need to get accuracy capped is an accuracy node. I went ahead for the depth perception node because it's an inspired learning slot and it gives us crit chance. Super nice. All right, so we're hitting all the time. We're attacking at a rate. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I'll explain at what rate we need to attack here in a second for optimal DPS. Third thing, crit chance. Obviously, we are a cast on critical build. That means we only cast when we crit. So Cyclone needs crit all the time. The main way you're going to do that is by scaling the Assassin Ascendancy with power charges. And number two, links in your chest. Okay, so Cyclone needs to be on a 6 link with Ice Nova. And that's going to be linked to crit gems. Okay, very important. Inspiration, increased critical strikes, and power charge and crit. It's got to be those three because they have qualities that grant us crit strike chance. On top of that, increased crit chance or increased critical strikes gives us a lot of base crit. Technically, you wouldn't need this if you had a super hot Watcher's Eye, but I'm not Mr. Moneybags. It's up to you. So I just choose a socket increased critical strikes, and I encourage you to as well. It's a super cheap option. You don't need more damage in this build. There's no reason for it. So one thing I would recommend is Anomalous Inspiration for that crit chance, by the way. Instead of the default version, Anomalous is not much more expensive. Go ahead and pick that up for yourself. This is also super important. Later we'll get into it for our mana cost. Okay, final thing, fourth thing that a cast on crit build really needs to worry about for damage recovery rate. Cooldown recovery rate is probably something, if you haven't played Cast on Crit, that you are not terribly familiar with in Path of Exile. Basically, what cooldown recovery rate does for us is allows us to cast spells more often. Sorry, cast is the wrong word. Allows us to trigger spells more often. So if you didn't know, when you are triggering a spell in Path of Exile, whether it's with cast on damage taken or cast on critical strike, or I believe even with cast on melee kill, although I literally have never used that, but I assume it's the case, there is going to be an internal cooldown put on whatever you support that skill. Whatever skill you support with. Support whatever skill you support trigger with the thing. So when you put Cast on Crit on, Ice Nova is going to get a cooldown. Now, this is super annoying because we want to be casting Ice Nova a lot. Okay, when we crit with Cyclone, we want to be casting Ice Nova. So how do we make sure we cast Ice Nova every single time we hit with Cyclone? This is where everything comes together, okay? Cooldown recovery rate is going to make sure Ice Nova's cooldown is low enough where Cyclone will trigger it every single hit. So, let's bring everything together. Attack rate, hit chance, crit chance, cooldown recovery rate. Okay. The magic number you're looking for, first of all, attack rate is 10.12 for optimal DPS. 10.12. A little bit higher is okay. Okay, if you're up to 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, it's going to be fine. You're not even going to notice a difference. If you're below 10.12, you're going to notice it starts to feel a little bit bad. So I would try to be 10.12 or above. Mine is not set up that way. I'll explain why in a second. But if you're going for optimal DPS, you kind of want to configure your character in a way, maybe if I don't have Slipstream active for my belt, maybe I don't want Onslaught on my build, that'll reduce my attack rate, right? So you can kind of play around with things here in order to get there. But attack rate's super important. You want 10.12. Second thing, cooldown recovery rate. Second big number. You're looking for 52% cooldown recovery rate. Okay, where do we get cooldown recovery rate? Number one place is actually on your Cast on Critical Strike gem. I really recommend, if you want to play this build, pick up Awaken Cast on Crit. You need it. Okay, don't play this build with normal Cast on Crit. You can do it. It just feels way worse. Pick up the Awaken version because it has rate scaling with gem levels. Why does that matter? So, with each level of Awaken Cast on Crit, you'll notice we're going to gain some cooldown recovery rate. That second modifier from the bottom, supported skills have 19% increased cooldown recovery rate. That is actually for a level 4 Awaken Cast on Crit. A level 5 Cast on Crit is going to give us 22%. Remember, we're going for 52. Let's assume you level up your Cast on Crit all the way to 5. By the way, this gem sells for like 3x. It's super cheap to go get it yourself if you wanted to not worry about leveling it. Anyway, once we get it up to level 5, it's actually going to give us 31% increased cooldown recovery rate if we take the +3 node critical mastery in the tree. This is super strong. Pick it up. That's giving us a total of, I believe it is 2% cooldown recovery rate per level. 3%. It is 3%. So that one node is providing you a ton of cooldown recovery rate for your build that you don't need to go get somewhere else. So this Awaken Cast on Crit is going to give us a total of 31%. That one node in the tree giving us 9% of that. Super strong node. Thank God GGG put that mastery in the game because that provides us a ton of power. So where are we getting the remaining 21% cooldown recovery rate? Okay, because we need 52. So we're only getting 31 from our Cast on Crit. Super important you have Awakened, okay? There's other ways to get cooldown recovery rate in the game. Most of them on gear. There's a couple ways to get on jewels to reach that 52. The strongest way, in my opinion, is the Eater of Worlds implicit on boots. Boot slot is extremely strong for every build in terms of speed, resistance. It's just a great utility slot. I went ahead and got Onslaught on my boots because that was a priority for me. And since I had rare boots, I could throw cooldown recovery rate on there through the implicit. So I went ahead and got 5% from there. You can get more. I didn't need more in this build, and I'll show you why in a minute. But that gets us up to 36. We only need 16%. So where are we going to get that? Your belt. Belt is the second most popular spot to get cooldown recovery rate. You can get up to 20% on a flow untethered. So there we go. There's my remaining, let's see, I needed 16%. I just made sure I had more than 16% on the belt. That's going to cover us to 52%. Okay. We have the attack rate. Okay, 10.12. We have the cooldown recovery rate, 52%. What does that mean? You're going to be triggering Ice Nova 10.12 times per second, right? So we talked about cast on crit. Why do I ruin my cast on crit? Trigger rate. Okay, we talked about how important it is. Of course, you want to be casting a spell when you hit things. I've noticed this build has so much damage now. Cast on crit is so good, you actually don't need to optimize as much as you think to run a tier 16. So right now, I choose to invest more into speed. That's why I've picked up Onslaught. That's why I've picked up my Harbinger of Time from the belt. That's why I've picked up Frenzy Charges. So, that's going to end up giving me, 40 to 50% extra move speed through the map. I value that more than damage. If you value the damage, go ahead and min-max your attack rate. Now, why Frenzy Charges? First of all, they scale with Badge of the Brotherhood to give me some movement speed from my travel skills, right? Some cooldown recovery right there. But on top of that, they do something really cool. They increase our average hit. Okay. Now, average hit is not super important in terms of damage per second, but it is super important in terms of clear speed. Okay. This build, Cast on Crit, a lot of people build it in terms of damage per second. In mapping, I hit a mob maybe one time, and it dies. And I want to scale that up. I want to make sure when I hit a mob, it instantly shatters, and I can kill the entire screen in one spell hit. Frenzy Charges increase our average hit by about 50% on our Ice Nova. Same for our other skills. It's about 40 to 45% on our other skills. So it absolutely blasts the average hit and the clear speed when you have Frenzy Charges. Super good quality of life. You'll be hitting mobs 50% harder for each hit, which is going to, absolutely, blast you off in maps. Now, another thing it does is increase our average hit damage from Herald of Ice. The more damage multiplier from Frenzy Charges actually applies to Herald of Ice explosions. So that is one of the few ways that we can actually scale the damage on Herald of Ice, which of course increases our clear speed. All right, so the final thing I want to cover for you guys on this build is the mana cost of our skills. If you didn't know, a couple leagues ago, GGG went ahead and changed Cast on Crit so that, well, not just Cast on Crit, but all triggered spells so that they cost their full mana costs, and then a little bit more in some cases. So how do we handle all that mana cost? Basically, when that change came in, a lot of people considered Cast on Crit probably dead, unplayable. There are some things you can do to get around it. First of all, on our rings. So in this build, it is very popular to take a Mark of the Shaper. If you don't know what that ring does, here you go. Basically, it's going to give you a ton of spell damage. That is the only reason you're taking it. 70% increased spell damage. Now, the problem I have with this ring is it puts a lot of restrictions on the rest of our build, being our other ring also has to be an Elder item, and I can't craft any kind of minus mana cost on this ring, so I need to find it elsewhere. So you might see this Mark of the Shaper if you're looking on PoEDB or PoE Ninja, for builds like mine. I choose not to take it just because it makes building the rest of the characters so much more expensive and so much more difficult. You don't need it for damage.
Like I said, we're a mapping character. Okay, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 million, sitting in that range of DPS, we're gonna be perfectly fine, more than comfortable. So what we choose to do instead is just pick up quality of life in those ring slots, and we actually make up some of the difference in the damage lost with an extra curse. A lot of builds can't get this extra curse because it's super expensive to get it on gloves, which is where they would normally get it. Some of them do self cast it or do a mark like Assassin's Mark on hit, which is also possible. That's a good workaround if you're using the shape mark of the shaper, or you can just get a couple of curse on hit rings. So we do LE weakness, we do frostbite. It's all automatic since we're a mapping character. Frostbite and elemental weakness aren't going to have reduced effect against, they have reduced effect against bosses. They're not going to have that problem here. So we'll just go ahead and pick those up. And we can craft on minus mana cost. So our first minus mana cost sources are going to be our rings, -7 each. You can catalyze these for -8 each. I didn't need to do that because, as you can see here, my Ice Nova actually has no mana cost. That's kind of the goal you're looking for. Ice Nova is the expensive skill because you're triggering it the most. Making sure it has no mana cost is really important. Now, if you're not running a Badge of the Brotherhood, I would recommend also doing a craft on the amulet, but not the same craft we have here on the ring. I would recommend making your Cyclone free. Okay, Cyclone is costing you about 3 mana every time it's cast. As your attack rate scales up in the map, whether you get a Soul Eater buff or an Acceleration Shrine or I'm not sure what the shrine is called, but the one that repeats your skills, that also increases your mana cost. So sometimes it is worth it to just make sure, Cyclone, which might be casting up to 20 times per second, make sure that's just free. You can do that with a channeling skills cost -3 mana on your amulet. I don't choose to do that because I do, like I said, I'm a frenzy charge enjoyer, so I want to take advantage of those frenzy charges with Badge of the Brotherhood and that elusive effect, just to go zoom zoom. So where else are we getting minus mana costs? The Watcher's Eye. There's mine right there. So my Watcher's Eye right now, I prioritize the Clarity mod. That's giving you -10 mana cost. Anything else you can get on there is just bonus. I think I got the Hatred cold damage on top for about 5 exalts. But just the Clarity mod sits around 1.5 to 3 exalts, kind of depends on the day or who's online. And then in order to proc that, we're just using a level 1 Clarity. No reason to get it any higher. We're already only at 48 unreserved mana, so even the mana regeneration here is not worth leveling up the skill. Just leave it at level 1. But the final spot that I found is the most efficient is a Replica Conqueror's Efficiency. You can get one with a decent corruption for not too much more. So You Cannot Be Hindered is a nice corruption for us in a map. There's a lot of sources of hinder. This just keeps you from getting slowed down. You could get your Corrupted Blood immunity here. You could get blind immunity. Really anything is going to help you out a lot. Maps are a large source of all those mechanics. And that's about it for minus mana cost. There are other things you can do to help you out. For example, the inspiration support. So in our main links here, we do have inspiration. You're going to need that on your Ice Nova no matter what. It is a very large quality of life there. All right, I'm going over the footage right now and realizing that this is already almost a 30-minute video. I did have a separate section planned just for the mapping strategy, but since I'm such a long-winded asshole, I'm not going to be able to fit it into this video. So I'm going to make that a separate video. You can check out just specifically on how I'm mapping the most efficiently to, create the most amount of currency with this build as possible. Thank you for watching the video. It'd be awesome if you could leave a comment, maybe a like. Let me know what you think about not only the build, but also, my video making, what I can do better. It'd be super nice to look at because I have a lot of fun doing this stuff and making this stuff. So, yeah, any questions, just feel free to shoot me a comment. All right, and have a good one.